approach to reopening?
OK, there's lots to pick up on there. I mean, first of all, mobility data shows that people change their behaviour before lockdown and before the fear campaign. People, I believe, would naturally temper their behaviour in an epidemic because it's frightening. I'm sure everybody was thinking, you know, will I get this? Is it going to affect me? Is it going to affect my family? Is it going to affect my community? Everybody would be thinking like that. I think a government that relies on nudge and subliminal methods and fear messaging to control the population, to make them behave a certain way, has stopped trusting the population. And I actually think the British people deserve a lot more respect and trust than that.
The trans debate has been a contentious subject throughout 2021. From the introduction of the Olympics' first trans athlete to the attempted cancellation of J.K. Rowling over her stance about women's rights. Radio legend Jenny Murray was one of my first uncancelled guests who tackled the debate and gave her passionate case for the preservation of the word woman.
You know, I don't care if a woman wants to live as a man or a man wants to live as a woman. Whatever, be happy, whatever you want to be, but don't stamp on the toes of those of us who were born women. Sex actually does matter, biology matters, and we have fought for years and years and years to have the right to have single-sex spaces, to have refuges for women who have suffered domestic violence, all of those things. Prisons that the sex needs protecting. And that was my argument, you know.
But like J.K. Rowling, you're then called transphobic and a TERF.
A TERF. When somebody suggests that when I had my two sons, I chest-fed them. No, I didn't. I breast-fed them. What's wrong with the word breast? It's our word. Women have breasts. You don't chest feed a baby.
Yeah, but you felt, I guess what's happened to a lot of people though is they feel the world around them change, and I presume you felt the BBC around you change. You didn't necessarily change, they did.
The whole question of impartiality has become stricter, I think. You know, there were times with previous directors general where I was actually asked to write a column for the Express. Oh, you know, it's great, it's really good publicity for Women's Hour. It's got much stricter.
Yeah, because you were also stopped from covering the election, I believe, and
that's because,
Brexit.
That's because I was a Remainer, and I managed to make that clear. But what was one of the reasons that, you know, when I went to tell my boss that I was going to leave, he said, oh no, my goodness, what are we going to tell the audience? They're going to be really upset. And I said, no, this is my decision. I want to go. And one of the reasons I wanted to go was to be freer, to say what I wanted.
And you are unleashed now.
And I'm unleashed at the Daily Mail, the lovely Daily Mail. What we know is if you fat shame somebody, it doesn't help at all. It just makes them draw back into their upset and their depression,
and
they go and eat
you to the cupboard.
Bar of chocolate.
Well, no, absolutely,
like
and I know a lot about this because I've been 3 stone heavier than I am now and 3 stone lighter than I am now. And I hate saying this, Jenny, because it makes me feel like I'm turning into one of those snowflakes that I despise. But I don't like the F word, and that's why I was so interested that you used it. And I'm talking about the FAT word because
yes,
for me,
I assumed that
it's
was the
like
one you were talking about,
dagger.
not the other one.
No, not the other one. Because for me, it's like a dagger. It's like a dagger. Do you know what I mean? Because that's one of the words that's been thrown at me.
It is. It's really upsetting, but
you owned it.
I own it, absolutely. And I think we need to be honest about it.
So you would describe yourself as fat?
Not now.
No, but previously.
Good Lord.
No, but when you were 23 stone, because I never would. When I was that size, I would never say it.
I was obese. I was...
But see, obese is okay for me.
Why?
I'm okay with obese because it feels like a medical term. There's something about that word fat.
That just means fat, love, that's all it means.
No, I know. I'm very sad to say that COVID was probably the word of the year in 2021. But rather than spew out all of the absolute hysteria of the mainstream media, I sought to shed light on how we could best deal with the pandemic while preserving our way of life and limiting other health crises. One of my inspirations is Professor Jay Bhattacharya. He's from Stanford University. He's the co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration too.
It's really hard, right? Because I don't think perfect focus protection is possible anywhere when the disease is widespread. But you can do better than places like the UK. And actually, I shouldn't just blame the UK. Where I live, California did. And the key is that you have to think to yourself that it is possible, and then start designing policies, for instance, to protect nursing homes. A lot of the deaths in the UK have happened in care homes, and just as in California, where I live, many of the deaths have happened in nursing homes. You have to protect people live in the workforce, older people in the workforce, who, if exposed to the virus, would face dire risk. So for essential workers that are required to go out, maybe give them sick leave or give them lots and lots of strategies were possible, and not all of them adopted. Instead, the UK and many other places adopted lockdowns, which have caused incredible harm. Just as you said, Dan, at the beginning of the introduction, the harm includes damaged, delayed medical services. Like many women skipped mammograms. They're going to show up this year with stage 4 breast cancer that should have been picked up last year, and they will die from it. And they should not have died from it. Where there are untold damage to the mental health of the population. And we could go on and on. The harms of the lockdown are incredible. If you go to collateralglobal.org, where I'm working on trying to document these harms, which I hope the public inquiries look into when they're done, because it's not just a costless intervention. It's an enormously costly one. Internationally, it's thrown tens of millions of people into poverty worldwide, including starvation. Hundreds of thousands of children in South Asia, for instance, are killed, dead from starvation and malnutrition as a result of the lockdowns. So it was a very harmful, costly strategy. And I actually don't think it protected the old. Despite the lockdowns, you had terrible outcomes in the UK and elsewhere. I'll just give you an example of a success story. In Florida, which actually followed a focus protection strategy, it's had lower mortality once you adjust for the age, the older age distribution of Florida, than California. Actually, even if you don't do the adjustment, it's had lower. And California is locked down. For a year and a half, my children have not had normal school, whereas in Florida, 100% of the schools have been in person. So to answer your question, yeah, it's a complete mistake to have relied on lockdowns as a strategy. It's not actually protected people against COVID and has had all these collateral harms. At the same time, I also celebrate what we've achieved. I don't think it's not just that we should look back and pick at what we did. I agree with you, Dan. It's worth doing that, but it's also worth celebrating.
We store, pick, pack and post on behalf of e-commerce sellers. So the guys that you buy from online, particularly in the last couple of years, people have been stuck at home buying from people online. We actually ship that stuff out.
So if you make stuff in your garden shed and sell it online, Hubu can take care of all the logistics, all the packaging, all the difficult stuff that really stops businesses from growing.
We can. We're unique in doing it for a much broader range of clients. They've always been fulfillment companies, which is what a company like ours is called. But they've tended to work with big clients, clients that have relatively few items and that ship them in huge volumes. We work with clients of all sizes, complex clients, clients that sell secondhand or vintage, small clients, people that do sell from their bedroom, so a really broad range.
Tell us about the physical side of the business.
It looks unlike a traditional warehouse, so we really revolutionized the way the warehouse floor works. There are some fundamental problems with warehousing, the biggest one being that it makes people miserable. It has them walking miles and miles every day. The micro warehouse collapses the business into a smaller warehouse that is run by a single individual. So that might be a picker or a packer. For us, they manage the whole thing, more like a retail unit, all of the inbound, all of the outbound, the picking, the packing, the posting. And crucially, they engage with the client as well. So they get that feedback loop that lets them know they're doing a wonderful job or helps them if they're not.
How about your East End background? Does that help?
It's made me tenacious and hardworking, but it's also made me very concerned that the people that work for us should be treated properly and paid properly. We work really hard to
because you know what it's like at the sharp end.
Yeah, exactly. It's just got sharper and sharper over the last 10 or 15 years. Those kinds of jobs, the wages haven't increased. Meanwhile, the cost of rent these days is ridiculous. It's really difficult for people to make ends meet that are doing those kinds of jobs.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
There have been many opinions on how we should live with COVID restrictions and whether we should accept that this is some sort of new normal. I don't, by the way. But many of those who questioned this approach were often silenced by the left and the mainstream media. Member of the House of Lords, Claire Fox, has been vocal in her condemnation of the government's policies. In this interview, she discussed how people coped during the pandemic while isolated from their loved ones.
One of the shocking aspects of the pandemic was that when we were all demobilised and told we had to sit at home on the couch and kind of listen for the latest announcement, people were frightened, people didn't know initially what to think, and so they took to kind of like joining WhatsApp groups and trying to work things out and looking on the web and trying to understand the virus and trying to get... And then they found that innocent questions, you know, like saying, well, does anyone understand this part of the virus? Suddenly, somebody'd say, oh, there's a great video interview with some doctors in America, and then YouTube would take it down. And then the government were describing anything that didn't fit a particular narrative, and actually pressurising the big tech to take things down. They were saying that is misinformation. Now that then created this atmosphere of censoriousness that made people, I think, become suspicious of official information, and it's fueled...
Well, there's been a lack of scientific debate at a time where you could argue scientific debate has never been more important.
But I think it was also about trusting us to say we can sort out the wheat from the chaff. Look, there are some mad ideas around, but that's what public debate's around, where you can start saying that's a crazy idea. When they start banning things or start creating an atmosphere where they say that is a dangerous piece of information, that sadly fuels conspiratorial thinking.
Emma Raducanu's victory this year at the US Open was a proud moment for most Brits. But for some reason, many on the left tried to use the new superstar's heritage to push a political cause. The brilliant author and Spectator columnist Douglas Murray spoke with me about how sport was being used as a justification for open borders. The thing that made me so angry about this, Douglas, was an assumption, an absolute assumption in this narrative that Emma Raducanu and her family, as legal immigrants to the UK, would support mass illegal immigration across the Channel. Whereas actually, the more illegal immigrants that enter the UK without their papers and that sort of thing, the less immigration there is of brilliant citizens like the Raducanus.
Yeah, that's right. It's great to be with you, Dan. That's completely right. There has been, what I mentioned in this recent column at Spectator was that It's just so stunning to me that 7 decades, as I said, after mass immigration began into the UK, we still have this kind of unbelievably pre-elementary debate about it, where the fact that Emma Raducanu happens to have been born to parents who migrated to the UK somehow means she has to be used as part of a political football to explain that therefore all immigration is great. And there are lots of things that come in a set of presumptions and claims like that. One of them is that there's sort of no difference, as you mentioned, between legal and illegal immigration. Of course there is. The difference is the law. The second thing is that it sort of suggests that immigration is only a good. And after 7 decades, we should be able to say, yeah, it's got lots of good things in it. And nobody tires of pointing them out. And there are downsides too. And you've got to take the rough with the smooth, the ups with the downs, and that we should by now be able to recognize that. We shouldn't have to pretend, as I said in the column, that everyone, for instance, crossing the Channel into Dover is a future US Open winner, and that basically Britain should announce to the other countries that they shouldn't bother sending anyone to the US Open in future. It will be a totally British-dominated podium for the rest of time. These are sort of just nursery-like fallacies, and I'm just stunned that they keep being trotted out after all of these years, because the public know better than this. We know it's a complex picture. We're not just bigots in waiting who have to be sort of hit with a stick to get into line with all of the pabulum you hear from figures like those that I quoted in my piece and you just quoted. But it's not just this. This is an example of the fact that on issue after issue in modern Britain, we seem to be totally incapable of being treated like adults and having conversations that adults should be able to have.
While the Conservative Party maintained a poll lead for most of the year, many traditional Tories have started to lose faith with the party as a result of Boris Johnson's big government approach, including increased taxes and continued draconian controls on the way we live thanks to COVID. So is Nigel Farage's former party Reform the answer? Its new leader, Richard Tice, sat down with me to put his case.
You know, they tried to cancel us, but actually we have, as you say, we've been uncancelled. Yes. And not before time.
By the polls.
Yeah, by the polls, and because actually what's happened is people have suddenly realised that they're no longer the Conservatives. I've been calling them for 6 months the con-socialists. They are the party of high tax, high regulation, meaning low growth and lower wages. So in a sense, they're just like the Labour Party. So they're both socialists, and that actually is not what people who voted Conservative at the last election, including many Red Wall voters who had never previously voted Conservative, so they're looking elsewhere and they say, who's going to stand up for decent, ordinary British workers?
Do you need a high-profile defection to actually have a presence at Westminster?
All comers welcome. It would be, of course, it would be great. I mean, it would be.
And is there a chance
helpful.
of that? Are you speaking to anyone?
I mean, obviously, I couldn't reveal negotiations on the live on air. But
are there Tory MPs, without naming any names?
There are some very disgruntled Tory MPs.
And have they approached you?
Who realise that this is no longer the party that they thought it was. And they can't trust what their leaders say. They don't recognise the Prime Minister from the person who was elected in December 19. And they're very, very concerned. And they're working out what can they do about it. And I think, you know, democracy is best served when there's more choice. You get more debate, more discussion, and then voters have essentially, they've got more choice. So we've got, as we speak, I've got about 280 candidates for the general election. We'll be standing, give or take, 600, and there'll be 5 parties that are standing that sort of number of candidates, and we'll be one of them.
Rod Liddle has arguably been our most popular regular on Uncancelled this year. He's got his booze, sometimes he's got his cigarettes, but most importantly, he talks about the major issues of the day with an ample dose of dry wit and unapologetic comments. On this next highlight of 2021, I spoke with Rod about the continued culture war within the music world and the effects it has had on the industry.
If I were a black violinist who had just been taken on by the English touring opera, I would be extremely worried that I'd been taken on not because I was a brilliant violinist, but because of the colour of my skin. And that's the other terrible thing it does, is that it casts doubt upon the people who are taken on who may come from ethnic minority backgrounds, and who are not there because they're brilliant, but because they're black, which is an absurdity and condescending and vile. I mean, I remember when I was at the Today programme, editor of the Today programme, we had a large number of ethnic minority reporters, producers, researchers, and so on the programme. And we had to do audits, race audits all the time, which really annoyed me. And it annoyed them, and it annoyed me that there would be any suggestion that any of them would have been taken on because of the colour of their skin rather than because they were brilliant journalists. It is condescending, patronising, and it's wrong, purely wrong.
And do we have any idea why the Arts Council didn't seem to back this decision? Was this just the ETO being uber woke as a sort of renegade organisation, or did they think there was some sort of pressure to diversify?
I suspect they did think there was some sort of pressure to diversify, and I think also that stuff I was talking about earlier, which is that all of our corporations, all of our third sector corporations, the public sector institutions, are many of them are led by people who wish to prove their woke credentials by being more virtuous than thou and more radical than thou in imposing fatuous and idiotic and divisive and unpleasant regimens on the people who work for them. We've seen that at the National Trust. We've seen it at various Oxbridge colleges, and we're seeing it now throughout the various institutions which preserve our musical heritage back to the 16th century.
All year, I've spoken about the authoritarian and unjustified measures Australia imposed on its citizens as it turned itself into a hermit kingdom and unsuccessfully pursued a zero COVID policy, which thankfully they eventually had to abandon. One man who took the place of the toothless mainstream Aussie media was wedding photographer turned citizen journalist Rukshan Fernando, whose shocking protest footage was viewed by millions around the world.
Back up! Back up! Squad, you got the police, you saw them grab a few people. Don't go ahead of us. Gotta go around the back, guys.
Wow. Rukshan Fernando, I wanted to play that footage because it still shocks me to my core that I'm witnessing scenes in Australia, the great country, I thought a country that believed in freedom, doing this to its own citizens who don't believe that draconian lockdowns lasting months and months and months are the answer to the COVID crisis. And Rukshan, it's been fascinating for me to see your journey too, because you now have loads of COVID extremists attacking you.
That's right, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show. Look, I mean, I've grown up in Australia my whole life, and the values that I've grown up with, I can't believe the scenes that I'm witnessing. And as you said in your intro, the media here has really failed to kind of show that side of the story and show what people in my country are going through, particularly in the state of Victoria. And to think that, myself as a wedding photographer who was, obviously working and then hit by these lockdowns, that I've had to go out there and capture these scenes and document that side of the story it just tells you everything you need to know about the media landscape here, who have pretty much just decided to become the mouthpiece for the government and, totally ignore some of the frustrations which we're seeing in the community who are faced with these, as you put it, very draconian measures that we would have thought we'd never see in a country such as Australia. And that last footage you just played was at the War Memorial, the Shrine of Remembrance, and it's a symbol of freedom in many ways. And to think that unarmed Australians are fleeing from the police who are firing rubber bullets and tear gas canisters at them is a shocking image that you would never think you would see in a country like Australia. But I'm living it, and the world is watching, and it's shocking in many ways.
Lockdowns have become synonymous with the last 2 years of our lives. But just how effective were they in stifling the spread of COVID-19? Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School, biostatistician Martin Kulldorff spoke with me about just how effective these freedom and economy-destroying measures really were. The term herd immunity is a scientific fact. I mean, what is going on here?
Yeah, it's very strange. It's like attacking somebody for believing in gravity. Both gravity and herd immunity are known scientific phenomena. So it's very strange what they wrote in the British Medical Journal. I think it's very embarrassing for the British Medical Journals that they publish sort of tabloid gossip and slander.
Why are they doing this, Martin? Why is there such a desire by, I would describe them as the scientific establishment, but I would also say the political establishment, the media establishment? Why is there a desire to not question the efficacy of lockdowns, especially given this is such a new addition to the public health playbook?
Yeah, it's sort of surprising, but I guess that, they implemented their preferred option with the universal lockdowns, and we now know that it didn't work. They said that it would protect the older, vulnerable people, but it didn't. A lot of people died. So it's clear now that what they proposed and what they implemented didn't work. So they don't have any arguments anymore. So instead of arguing the science, they are using slander and smears. What we should have done was to do better protection of the older high-risk people who are high risk of mortality, because while anybody can get the disease, there's more than 1,000-fold difference between the old and the young in terms of dying. So again, this winter there's going to be another wave, so we have to do much better protecting the older vulnerable people, not through vaccinations, but also through other means.
From David Chappelle to Ricky Gervais, comedy has become the latest target of those who just love cancel culture. Many comedians privately admit they now censor their routines in fear of being hunted down by the woke mob online. But comedian and Trigonometry podcast host Konstantin Kisin is not standing for that, and he talked with me about the so-called critics who are trying to politicize comedy for their own agenda. Dave Chappelle is the latest performer to feel the prick of the politically correct pitchforks after he faced a furious backlash from the LGBTQ community for making remarks in his latest Netflix special, The Closer, that some say are transphobic.
And they've canceled people that are more powerful than me. They canceled J.K. Rowling. My God, J.K. Rowling wrote all the Harry Potter books by herself. She sold so many books, the Bible worries about her. And they canceled her because she said in an interview, and this is not exactly what she said, but effectually, she said gender was a fact. And then the trans community got mad. They started calling her a TERF. I didn't even know what that was. But I know that trans people make up words to win arguments.
Now, Netflix staff members joined the circus in Hollywood today as they staged a walkout in protest at the special not being taken down. To chants of Trans Lives Matter, campaigners pushed for Netflix to respond to a list of asks, including the hiring of more trans executives and greater spending on trans and non-binary content. But they were met by counter-protesters who simply said, "We like his jokes." And as the comedian Konstantin Kisin points out, there has been a real disparity between how much real audiences truly enjoyed his latest stand-up special versus how the woke critics rated it. Did they hate it because Chappelle dared to, in their view, punch down at angry trans activists, or was it because he called out the perfectly called out perfectly the far left's faux woke rage and hypocrisy. So, is giving certain groups special protection from the butt of comedians' jokes not patronising and ironically denying them true equality? Well, I'm delighted to say the comedian and Trigonometry podcast host Konstantin Kisin joins me now. Konstantin, wow, what do you make of this one?
Well, it's good to be back, Dan. I'm starting to think Dave Chappelle is even cleverer than I always thought, because I think this is a very good ploy by him to get as many people as possible to watch his last special. And I'm seeing a lot of people saying that. You know, I didn't even know who Dave Chappelle was. I didn't know what he does. And this is the first of his specials that I've seen. And now I've gone back and watched all the previous ones. So well done to him on getting the attention that I think his special deserves. But I think you're right, Dan. We are in a position now where, you know, the irony of it is, and you played a very short clip there of him talking about the trans issue, but Dave Chappelle goes after everyone. I'm Jewish, as you know. He makes fun of Jews. In fact, at one point, I think he jokingly compares Jews to the Nazis of all people, and so on and so forth. He makes fun of black people, white people, women, etc., men, of course. And if you sat through that whole thing and you thought, well, this is all very well, and these are just jokes, but then when it gets to your particular issue, then you have a massive meltdown. I think you're not being very consistent there, which is interesting. And of course, Chappelle did say with this that the reason people get upset with his jokes is that they don't listen, and it's good to see them proving them wrong.
British rapper Zuby became an outspoken voice during the pandemic over his concerns about how COVID has been used to control our daily lives. He's become a popular voice for the voiceless on social media, and one of the guests on my show who receives the biggest reaction from you.
Zuby, we're going down a very worrying path in the UK, as I know you're following closely. Today, the news confirmed by the government that there will be an official no jab, no job policy in the NHS from April. If you are not double vaccinated, you're booted, no matter what level of natural immunity you have, no matter your age, no matter the service that you've put into the NHS. What's happening to the UK, Zuby?
This is insane, and it's not that this is just happening in the UK. These are the same policies sweeping through across the USA, Canada, various Western European countries, New Zealand, Australia, even certain developing countries. And the notion that you're going to put the job, I mean, look, firstly, last year it was all clap for the NHS, these people are heroes and whatnot. And now I think it's absolutely disgusting the way that they are now being villainized. The same thing has happened in all of these other countries. Also, the notion that people are concerned that the hospitals are overwhelmed or going to be overwhelmed, and then you want to fire tens of thousands or up to 100,000 healthcare workers, people who have been working throughout all of this thing while lots of people have been sitting on their butts, watching TV, working from home, collecting easy paychecks, whatever. These are the people who have actually been dealing with the patients. Tons of them have already contracted the virus and recovered from it and got strong antibodies, very robust immune systems already. And there's no logic to this. There's no science. And this is what it is that causes people to raise their eyebrows and ask questions.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.